this is just everything I'm going to cover. So everything that we're going to do, it's kind of like Autumn was saying, for kids with visual impairments, it's all about access to the curriculum. And so these are just going to be some things that we've implemented throughout the year with different classes and different age groups of kids. And we've done it for kids who have low vision, who have a disorder called CVI, which is very specific adaptations that they need, and then kids who are like totally blind or who have just light perception. And then we have a lot of students who are actually multiple disability, and this can be if they're FMD and visually impaired or MMD and visually impaired. So I'm just going to show you a bunch of different ways that you can adapt literacy in classrooms. So the big thing, I'm going to kind of have to turn the lights on for this one, and I apologize for the change. So the big thing that we start with, like we tell our teachers how to start with. We use this, we call them story buckets, or it can be called story boxes, however you want to call them. We make a story bucket for our story. So how we start with this is you're going to choose your story that you're teaching your class, and you're going to determine the standard, the lesson that you're being taught, or you're teaching them. So we make a list of the elements of the story. So our characters, our setting, the objects, the theme, the tone, the conflict, the plot. And we get real objects of all of these story elements and combine them into a bucket or box. So we order them, we try to keep them small because for every story that you're going to teach or whatever you're going to do, it can kind of be overwhelming of these big storage totes. So the smaller the items we see are just better. Okay, so I'm going to show you. This is an example of a story box, but it's not kept in this. We actually have a tub that's like a popcorn container from the movie, but this was a book that we used. It was called If You Take a Mouse to the Movies. And so everything's kept in one, and how we go through it is, I'm just going to lay some objects out, but we went through it and found all the important characters, setting objects, everything like that from the story. And what we do is we let the students explore the objects one at a time. So like if you're in circle time, everything like that, we just pass out the objects like one at a time. We'll wait for it to go through. We talk about it. We always give verbal descriptions of these items. So I'm going to show you more on the PowerPoint. But these are just some of the items. So as I'm talking about a story box, you can kind of see what I'm talking about when I'm talking about all these objects from the story. So the first thing we do is make our story box of our objects. Then we're going to take photos of each item. So I always have like a black sheet or a black curtain, black tablecloth, whatever is easiest. And I put one item on it and I take a photo of it. It takes like 2 minutes to do all this of your objects. And then I upload them into a folder. We use Google in our district, so we just have a folder for that story. So it'd be If You Take a Mouse to the Movies, and I'd say real photos and put all my photos of the objects in it. Then we create picture symbols. I use Board Maker to make mine. And it's the same, you can use whatever you use you can find your pictures online. Our district has Board Maker for our speech too, so like we work really good with our speech pathologists, so that's like a resource that you have in your county to work good with them, because they have accounts for Board Maker as well. That's how they make their PET symbols. So we kind of co-teach with them a lot. And then the third thing we do for that same story is we create an adaptive PowerPoint. And we can either use the photos or we can use the picture symbol. So it depends on your kid and their visual impairment to see which ones you're going to use for your PowerPoint. I'm going to show you how to make those. So the story buckets that we say, we're just creating access to the literacy using the real objects. So kids with visual impairments, they really struggle with getting that access, and they get exposure to these objects. Like one thing I'll share is one of my students we did this story with, he knew what a Christmas tree was because they put one up every year, so he knew that like how the branches felt. He understood the tactile, he understood this, but he never understood until we had this actual object in front of him that there was a top to the tree, because his field of vision is like 16 inches. So past that 16 inches, like he doesn't see the top. When we look up, like he didn't understand that there was even like a top or anything that you put on the top of the tree. So like to him, a Christmas tree was like a bush. It was the same exact thing as like a bush. Like that's how he saw it in his head. He never understood that there was like a top to the tree. So like, then he was like, oh, like, why is it pointed? Where's it, like, so we talked about putting like a topper on, and like, people put stars or angels, and so it was just like that axis where she's called it like, and we call it incidental learning, because if you can see, we don't think about those concepts. And he also didn't understand, like, we went into a science lesson of it and the different types of trees, and he didn't understand that, like, a tree that he sees, it's like a stump to him. So he thought it was just the whole tree was this like big stump. He didn't understand that at the top there's branches and there's trees or leaves. So we had to go into all of that. But until he saw these objects, he didn't have that incidental learning that he had. So it provides the concrete examples, and everything with vision we use, just like hearing, is multi-sensory. It can be individualized to every student's specific needs, and again, with that vocabulary exposure, if they're not seeing it, they're not getting told about those things. So he didn't even understand like what like a tree topper meant, because he didn't understand there was a top to the tree. So it just adds that vocabulary to their literacy. These are just I went through the VI program through UK, and so these are some of the story buckets that some of my classmates have made too. And there's a wonderful resource, and I have it on at the end of this. They started like the grad school program where you can actually go on there and you can actually look up the story and see if it's already on there. And they have examples of pictures of the story buckets, the tactile symbols, the PowerPoints, the picture symbols. So it gives you that idea of like, if you're going to start a story, like what elements are important to the story. This is another story. This was the miraculous journey of Edward Tulane. So just giving you some ideas of different story buckets, what they look like. This was Guess What? This was Jack and the Beanstalk. So this is the early one. They were doing like nursery rhymes and stuff. So some people use like storage tubs. This was like a 5-gallon paint bucket, and like they put it's like a tool, I guess, belt from like Lowe's or something. But it goes over the bucket, and it usually holds like hammers and drills and stuff around it. But they actually found that like it was really good for these story buckets too, because they had their comprehension questions, their vocabulary cards and stuff on the outside pockets. So I really liked this one. This one was way down deep in the deep blue sea, but the actual box they kept it in was a treasure chest. So like the more that you can incorporate objects and things from the story, just even in the storage tote, I thought was really cool. Okay, so how we implement it, again, we handle one object at a time. We give verbal descriptions of each item. So we want to tell them the shape, the texture, and then we actually name that item, get that vocabulary in there. Then that's like the first time we do like an object walkthrough or a story bucket walkthrough. And we have our kids try to make predictions of what do you think our story is going to be about, just by seeing the objects, and they already have that vocabulary going and that conversation with their peers about it. Then we have the teacher usually reads the story aloud that first time, so they read the story aloud and they present the objects as they are mentioned in the story. And again, we only want to do one item at a time anyways, because with our kids with visual impairments, it also helps avoid that clutter. And then it'll allow the students to use these objects to answer your comprehension questions. So again, like some of our students are multiple disability students. If you have asked the question, like if you give a mouse if you take a mouse to the movies, what are they gonna want? And the students can actually like hold up the object then. Like that's why we work with our speech pathologists a lot too, because if that's their mode of communication to actually answer the questions using the objects, that gives that extra element in there as well. So this is the story bucket that you're gonna see. This is mine that I have in front of us. This is if you take a mouse to the movies. And you can do so many different activities with your story bucket. So we do the story box walkthrough that I told you about and get them predicting. They can retell the story. Like that's another thing we want our students to be able to tell, like retell that story. So we have them actually use the objects to retell that story. It gives them that concrete object to be able to put them in order for sequencing, and it helps them like provide that vocabulary as well. We've modified it for some of our multiple disability students by just giving them 3 objects and ask them to put them in order. Which object came first, next, and then last. So it's breaking it down there. There's that specially designed instruction. We also do like if we have this story, the lesson is a third grade. I think this story was a 3rd grade story, and it was cause and effect was the skill we were teaching. So we're saying if you give a mouse and one student when they're with their peer, they could pick an object And they say, if you give a mouse I don't know, one of them, but like a needle or whatever it was. I think if they give them popcorn, then they need a needle and thread to thread it. But the peer gets to pick an object, and then the other peer has to find the effect of it. So like the other peer would also have to find the object that would fill that cause and effect statement. So it's hands-on, and they're working with their peer to do those activities as well. And then we did a vocabulary match. We can use the actual object, so again, like that print, if it's like they're really low vision or they need access in a different way. A lot of the students were doing like vocabulary words with definition matches. We were using the actual objects and a picture card, so they understood like the object to a picture. That was more of their level of being able to match. We did an object sort, so we threw in a bunch of other objects. So this is that concept of you want to actually teach what is not something as well. So we did an object sort, and we had the students put them in what objects were in our story, what objects were not. For a writing activity for our story, we implemented with this, students had to write a cause and effect statement. So some of them would just say, if you take a mouse to the movies, then he's going to want popcorn, and that's a cause and effect statement. Our students, like again, we were just going to be able to allow them to answer using two objects. So they came up and picked their objects, like if the mouse did this, then he did this. And they were able to still show that skill. They understand the cause and effect of the story using these objects. A math activity that we did, this was just, we implemented it to still be around our literacy activity. In the story, the mouse strings his popcorn using needle and thread. And so we used yarn and plastic needles and had our students thread popcorn. They were like paper popcorn that we cut out. And we could adapt it using numbers just 1 to 20. We did evens, we did odds, we counted by fives, counted by tens. And then one of our other language activities that we did, the speech was said that we were working on compound words. And so we used our objects, and then we made puzzle cards of different objects. So snowball, popcorn, outside, inside. Okay, so I'm talking a lot about these picture symbols, but so board maker is what I use, but for low vision, and these are just different. Some of your teachers are visually impaired in your county would know as well, but and they can help you do these a lot too. But if you can do it, just whip up any activity fast. If you get like going with this, board maker is really easy to use. And these are just going to be different adaptations for different impairments that I'm more focusing on this. But like a student with low vision, they usually need high contrast. And what that means is like a big difference between the picture and the background, so it stands out more to them. On Board Maker, you can make the background any color you need, and then you can actually change if you add in a mouse that's gray and the background's black, that's not big of a contrast. You can change the color of the mouse or the background. Like it lets you change the item or the background. Really easy. But these are picture symbols, and I know these are hard to say, so I can pass these around, but these are picture symbols that we made for all of the objects. So you're going to have a picture symbol for every object that you have in the story as well. And again, we used high contrast with ours, and then just stand out this way, and then we use the print on them. You can change to, you can write right on the symbol, so the word's on there too. Or sometimes if it's going to be too small and your student can't see that size of text, you can actually double side them and print just the word on the back as well. But I'll pass it around so you can kind of see what these look like. These are 3x3 symbols. You can change the size in Board Maker. So if they need even bigger than 3x3, or they make them smaller as well. Your teacher that's visually impaired can make a recommendation of the size they need if you need to consult with them. And I always say, no matter for low vision, I always present these on like a solid black background. Like just remove all that extra clutter and give them that really high contrast. Put your pictures on the black background. So this is just a picture of what's going around. These are the symbols for the story. I think it probably took me maybe 15 minutes to make all these pictures, print them, everything, and then I just put them, those ones are just on a ring. It's really easy that way. So for low vision, we always make the objects, the picture symbols, and the PowerPoint. That's what we do, those three things for the book. So for low vision on the PowerPoint, again, we want to remove all that background. We just want to, this is kind of like the template that I always use is a black background and white text. Just that stark contrast is usually the easiest for them to see. Again, like Autumn had referenced, we always, and I know it's different, but like we always try to add in sound effects to our PowerPoints. We always also want to have the text read aloud so that PowerPoint becomes an audiobook for them. So I just literally, I take the book and whatever the book has on that page, it's really cluttered, really busy on that. Instead, I just take a picture of that item. I have only the picture of that item or the object on that page. That's really important. And I put the text and I have it read aloud. I'm going to show you an example of this type of PowerPoint, so you know what I'm talking about. And hopefully it plays correctly. So this is the adapted PowerPoint for this story.
If you take a mouse to the movies, adapted book by Daniel Aldrich.
This is one of my students reading it. We also found that if it's read by a peer versus a teacher, they are more engaged. So this is actually one of my students reading it for a younger student.
If you take a mouse to the movies.
So a lot of our students are visually impaired, which this story just happened to be about something you need your vision for, going to the movies. So it's really hard concept. But like going to the movies is something my student was not familiar with. He had never been to a movie theater. So like explaining going to the movies and they're like, oh yeah, like it's always that same sound. He has no idea what they're talking about. So that's why we implemented that sound because he knows when movies played at his house, he was like, oh, that's in the theater too. Like that sound at the beginning of the, whatever they're called, the entrance of the movie. But, so we implemented that sound for this. But every kid was talking about how they love the smell of the movie theater. He had no idea what he was talking about because he's never been to a movie theater. So one of the things that we implemented is, and I'll pass this around too, like we talked about like you get popcorn in a box or bag or whatever, and then we added smell to it. So we actually have the senses in this, we just want to pass around. So we have our kids pass this around and actually smell it as well. And it smells just like a movie theater. So again, this one was like,
he'll ask you for some popcorn.
So again, our kids stay way more engaged with all these sound effects. Like, so they know when they hear that, they do that from their house when I've had popcorn before. And
when you give him the popcorn, he'll want to string it all together. Then he'll want to hang it on a Christmas tree. You'll have to buy him one.
Okay, so as they're listening to this, they also have the objects too. And the whole class loves these too. Like it's not just whatever, but you guys, every presentation we've been to so far is talking about repetition, repetition, repetition. Well, having this PowerPoint, they can just open it themselves on their device. Our district is 1-to-1, I guess. I don't know if everybody's is, but with their device, they just open this PowerPoint and they can listen to that story be read by their peer or in that kid's voice over and over and get exposure and they hear that story over and over.
On the way home, he'll see a snowman in your neighbor's yard. He'll want to make one of his own, then he'll need a carrot for a nose. When he's all finished, he'll decide to build a fort. He'll ask you to help him. Then he'll want to make some snowballs and have a snowball fight.
So that's a snowball fight. We were just trying to find sound effects for it, but and the kids are so much more engaged with all these effects. So
playing outside will make him cold. He'll want to go inside and curl up on the couch. He'll ask you for a blanket.
okay, so I'm gonna stop here. You guys don't need to watch this whole PowerPoint, but that is an adapted PowerPoint. So this is what we try to do for all of our stories. How do I play it from just this slide so you don't have to watch me go through? I'm just probably, okay, there we go. So the other one that we address is CVI is like one of the most common visual impairments right now for children. It's a cortical visual impairment, and we're seeing numbers just like skyrocket right now. So this is really common across the districts. So with CVI, the adaptations are pretty specific and different than like a low vision student would be. So they need that high contrast and that remove all that visual clutter as well. However, with CVI, usually a student has a preferred color, and that is usually on their CVI range from either their TBI or their doctor that diagnosed them. Because there's 10 characteristics of CVI, and the first one is preferred color, and that is what their vision, that's what they are focused to, that's what they're drawn to, and if you want them to look at something, using that preferred color makes a difference. So what we do for CVI adaptations, using those picture symbols, if you're teaching like a specific thing, we use what we call salient features, and this is a really good resource, and they have great examples and pictures already on there for you. But you would highlight the skill that you're like talking about, or to like describe that object or anything. So like just as just an example, like for a turtle, it just kind of looks like if you just put a plain picture of a turtle, they're not really focusing on anything about it. So like to teach about the turtle, we talk about how it has a shell, and you highlight. And for the salient features of it, if you want to talk about how a turtle has a shell and 4 legs and a tail, this is what we do for the student with CVI to actually visually attend to those features of it. And so they would get like an overall, like you always teach like part to whole. For them to get to the whole of what a turtle actually looks like and everything, we would teach these salient features of each object until they get to that whole. And you can adapt it on your picture symbols then. And then sometimes with your objects even, we've adapted with our objects and highlighted those features. You can use, like we've used red yarn before. Usually with CVI, the preferred color is either red or yellow, that's typical. But like we've outlined certain parts for them to focus on it and to see the difference with red yarn, yellow yarn, wiki sticks, just different things that you can highlight around. These are the CVI pictures. Mine were mainly high contrast and CVI that you saw. But again, using those preferred colors, it's usually red or yellow against that black background. And then our words are usually white text with that black background. And I just went through all of this. But the only other thing that we really use, I don't think there's a picture, we like spotlighting for CVI. So for them, they're attracted to, or they usually visually attend to light better. So in this example, if you just have your objects all laid out on the table or 2 objects and you want them to pick one, we use spotlighting, which usually it's like 300 lumens of the flashlight I think that you use. And how you do that is you just stand and you put the light towards the item, and it's usually you're standing behind the student. So you're behind them and you're putting the flashlight on the item, and they will visually attend to that item more. And when I talk about removing all that visual clutter in the black background, if we want our students to like look at our story while we're reading it, or our picture symbols, or the PowerPoint, if you print it and you're going over it, how much easier is it? This is a typical classroom. This is where we removed everything. We just put the black sheet up, and then she's wearing black as well. That you actually focus on what you want the student to be seeing. So for them to visually attend, we've seen a lot more. And honestly, I have a kindergarten teacher who just bought a hair cape, like a hair salon cape, and she just puts that on when she reads because she's like, I don't want to wear black every day. So she just puts this hair cape on and puts the book in front of her when she reads. And this is a really good resource I use for our text, like for them to actually look at the words, is the Roman word bubbling. And you can change it. It's really easy. Like it's just a website and it's already on there, and all you do is type your word, and it lets you pick your size and your color that you want to have it highlighted. And you can use these words right in your PowerPoint then, or you can print them out for them to have their vocabulary words. The only other thing is a lot of text, but the only other thing that says everything about blocking techniques, these are pictures of it. So if you want them to visually attend to a specific word or picture on the page, we use these called blocking or windows, and you can cut out black windows and move it around on the page. You can also put it right on the computer screen if they're using that PowerPoint to take all of that out. We also have done it where the text with the pictures has been too much for some of our students, so we actually like tape over, we use Velcro to cover it, and then you can pull up the tab so when they can visually look at the text in the picture. This is what I was talking about, where the books are so visually cluttered, but when you make your PowerPoints, or what we say is using our picture symbols or pictures of our objects in it, looking at that versus looking at this, our kids are understanding the concepts of what they need to versus that. They're not, this is so much visual clutter and so many just, they can't attend to that. If you have a total blind student, obviously you're gonna have a lot of your visually impaired teacher is gonna be doing a lot of the adaptations for that. But we always use the same with the objects. We do verbal descriptions. Some of them may be Braille students, so again, your teacher of the vision impaired will be providing the Braille for it. And then we use tactile symbols, so instead of picture symbols, it's their version of a picture symbol, but it's a tactile symbol. And you'll see like a whole set of the tactile symbols for this story is actually at my table right now. And again, we just want to use a lot of multiple sound effects for a student who's totally blind, all those extra sound effects and the sensories, like the smells. These are the tactile, it's just pictures of some of the tactile symbols. And then we do like vocabulary match. So the tactile symbol of mouse would be able to be matched with the mouse, and then they can, that's how they identify it, how they label it, and then they can tell you about the features of it. Like it has a long tail, it has 2 ears, things like that. And again, tactile symbols is very specific for the teacher of the visually impaired to be implementing with you, but we can even go into like concepts of them. Yellow tactile symbols, they have that tactile like a crown at the top, so those are actually nouns. Red symbols with that shape are places. So like we know if they feel that crown at the top, they know it's going to be a noun. If they feel this shape at the top, they know it's going to be a place, a setting. There's the green cards, which I don't have on here, they're verbs, so they know it's an action. So we can do all that literacy concepts of nouns, actions, verbs. White, this round one, they're objects. So those are broken down there too. For students who have multiple disabilities, the big difference that we use with them is like, again, we do the verbal descriptions, we do an item walkthrough like every day. Instead of just doing it like once at the beginning of the week and introducing those objects, we go through an item walkthrough every day with the story, and we make those same predictions, or what would the theme be, or have you ever seen this? With our multiple disability students, we really, really focus on their background information, those prior experiences with these a lot too. And one other thing we use with them is we use page flippers, so on actually turning the book. And we work with our OT on some of these as well, but this adds like depth and weight to the book pages, so it makes them easier to like grasp and actually turn the page, because we do see a lot of our kids with visual impairments have motor difficulties. So you can use these popsicle sticks are easy to hold onto and pull over, or we've even just, if you're really on the fly, throw some paper clips on each page. That way, that extra tactile, they can turn the page. We always try to keep it at the top right corner too, so we get that concept of turning from the top right to the left. We use bumpers or buttons, or even pom-poms. These are all these references, so if you can use that QR code to actually go on here. But my favorite one is this one that I told you there's a whole library of stories that are already adapted with the PowerPoints, the picture symbols, like it even gives you like the comprehension questions to use, what skill you're teaching for the story, and then it shows you a list of objects to get for that story.